The Maplewood Locket, a lesson in justice and grace. Maplewood was a town where time seemed to slow, a place known for its quiet, tree-lined streets and the friendly waves of neighbors. The birds chirped their cheerful melodies in the ancient maples, and the air carried the sweet fragrance of freshly bloomed hydrangeas from the nearby town square park. But inside Sterling Vostone, the luxurious jewelry shop nestled on the corner of Elm Street, a different kind of atmosphere was brewing, a storm of prejudice and arrogance that would ultimately teach a harsh but necessary lesson about kindness, fairness, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. Eleanor Vance was a woman of understated grace and unwavering strength. As a public defender for nearly 2 decades, she had dedicated her life to fighting for justice, often representing the voiceless and marginalized. She'd seen the worst and the best of humanity, the depths of despair and the soaring heights of resilience. But today, she wasn't standing in a courtroom, battling for someone else's freedom. She wasn't wearing her meticulously tailored power suit or speaking in front of a somber-faced judge. Today, she was simply another customer, a daughter searching for the perfect, timeless necklace for her mother's 70th birthday, and perhaps a small moment of peace amidst the constant demands of her demanding job. "Where are you watching from today?" Eleanor stepped into Sterling Vostone. The delicate chime of the bell above the door rang softly as she entered, a brief, almost musical announcement of her arrival. The interior was elegant, bathed in the warm glow of strategically placed golden lights that danced off the glass cases, illuminating rows of sparkling diamonds, intricate platinum settings, and delicate gold chains. A few other customers browsed quietly, their hushed whispers barely audible as they admired the exquisite pieces on display. Eleanor smiled, feeling a brief flicker of contentment in the peaceful, almost reverential space. But that peace was fragile, a thin veneer that would soon be shattered. Behind the counter stood Mr. Sterling, the shop's owner and manager. A man whose heart, once perhaps filled with optimism and genuine warmth, had gradually been hardened by years of perceived slights and accumulating bitterness. He prided himself on maintaining order and exclusivity in his shop, but his definition of order was deeply flawed, warped by his own prejudices and insecurities. He judged people based on superficial criteria, their clothes, their accents, the perceived social status they projected. He had crafted his own set of rigid, unspoken rules, and today, those rules would cost him dearly. Eleanor approached the counter, her voice soft and carrying an innate kindness, a characteristic she instinctively extended to everyone she met. She pointed to a delicate, antique-looking gold locket nestled amongst a display of vintage jewelry. "Good afternoon," she said politely. "I'd love to see this necklace, please." "Mr. Sterling barely glanced at her. His eyes, magnified by his thick glasses, were cold and assessing. His lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line. He took in her simple, unfashionable jeans and plain white blouse, her curly, auburn hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. In his narrow, judgmental mind, she was just another nobody, someone who didn't belong in his meticulously curated world of wealth and elegance. He'd already decided, without a shred of evidence, that she couldn't possibly afford anything in his shop. Instead of retrieving the necklace, instead of offering the courteous service one would expect in such an establishment, he folded his arms across his chest and frowned, a subtle but unmistakable expression of disapproval. "Are you lost?" he asked, his tone sharp and condescending. Eleanor blinked, taken aback by the unexpected rudeness. "Excuse me," she responded, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "This isn't exactly a place where people like you just walk in and act like they own it, Mr. Sterling said, his voice louder now, laced with thinly veiled disdain. He emphasized the phrase, "people like you," with a subtle sneer, leaving no doubt as to his meaning. The quiet hum of the jewelry shop evaporated. An uncomfortable silence descended, heavy and palpable. Heads turned, drawn by the escalating tension. Whispers began to circulate, like a cold draft seeping through cracks in a wall. Eleanor felt the weight of every stare, the unspoken judgments flickering in the eyes of the other customers. But she stood tall, her posture ramrod straight, her eyes remaining calm and steady, yet radiating an undeniable firmness. "I don't understand," she said, her voice measured and controlled. "I'm just here to buy a necklace, like everyone else." "Mr. Sterling smirked, a cruel, dismissive expression that twisted his features. "Sure, that's what they all say," he retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I think you should leave." Eleanor's heart ached, not for herself, but for the sheer, blatant ignorance standing before her. She had fought against injustice her entire life, witnessing its devastating effects on countless individuals. But facing it in such a casual, seemingly insignificant moment, over something as trivial as a necklace, stung deeper than she expected. It was a stark reminder that prejudice could rear its ugly head in the most unexpected places, even in a seemingly innocuous jewelry shop. "Why are you asking me to leave?" she asked, her voice remaining steady, though a hint of steel had crept into her tone. "Mr. Sterling scoffed, throwing all pretense of civility aside. "Because I don't serve people like you," he declared, his words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. The customers in the jewelry shop gasped, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, disbelief, and discomfort. A woman near the window covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror. A man in a tailored suit shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of disgust and pity. But no one spoke up. No one challenged Mr. Sterling's blatant display of prejudice. They were afraid of causing a scene, afraid of being thrown out themselves, afraid of becoming the next target of his venom. Eleanor took a deep, calming breath, reminding herself of all the times she had faced this kind of bigotry before. Prejudice, hate, it had many faces, many disguises. But she would not let it win. She refused to be intimidated. With a deliberate, almost theatrical gesture, she reached into her worn leather bag and pulled out her wallet. She flipped it open, revealing her badge, the gold emblem of the county public defender's office, gleaming under the shop's bright lights. Mr. Sterling's face paled visibly. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking ashen and unsteady. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said, her voice now firm and resonant, yet still maintaining a sense of calm authority. "I am the public defender of this county, and I know the law very well." Silence. Pure, heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the jewelry shop. "Mr. Sterling stumbled backward, his arrogance cracking like thin ice under unexpected weight. His lips trembled, and his hands shook uncontrollably. He had made a terrible, catastrophic mistake. He had judged a person based on his own warped, twisted standards, and now he was facing the consequences. His breathing grew shallow and rapid as panic set in. His mind raced frantically, searching for possible excuses, for some way to salvage the situation. But none came. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that there was no escape. The weight of his actions bore down on him like a collapsing wall, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly powerless. A flicker of genuine regret flickered in his eyes, a brief, fleeting moment of self-awareness. But it was too late. He had already sealed his own fate. Just then, as if on cue, the door to the jewelry shop burst open. Two police officers strode purposefully into the room. Officer David Reynolds, a veteran of the Maplewood Police Department, recognized Eleanor instantly. He had worked with her on several cases over the years and had witnessed firsthand her unwavering commitment to justice and her fierce defense of the underdog. He respected her deeply and knew that if she was involved, something serious had undoubtedly transpired. His jaw tightened as he turned his gaze to Mr. Sterling, his eyes narrowing with understanding. The air grew thick with tension as Officer Reynolds took a deep breath, already realizing the egregious mistake Mr. Sterling had made. He had seen people like Mr. Sterling before, those who mistakenly believed that power came from belittling others, from asserting their supposed superiority over those they deemed lesser. But today, justice would have the final say. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" Officer Reynolds asked, his tone respectful and concerned. Eleanor gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I was just trying to buy a necklace," she said, her voice calm and even. Mr. Sterling's mouth opened, but no words came out. He stood frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and humiliation. He had called the police, fully expecting them to side with him, to reinforce his authority and remove the undesirable element from his store. But now he stood exposed, a man undone by his own prejudice. The second officer, a younger recruit named Officer Miller, stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, we need to talk." "Outside," he said, his voice firm and official. Mr. Sterling tried to argue, to stammer out some kind of explanation, but his voice cracked and faltered. The officers gently but firmly escorted him out of the jewelry shop, leaving behind a stunned silence. Everyone watched, transfixed, as justice began to take its course. As the door shut behind them, the sales associate, a young woman named Sarah who had been too afraid to speak up earlier, stepped hesitantly up to the counter. Her eyes were filled with apology and a genuine sense of remorse. I'll get that necklace for you right away, ma'am," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor smiled warmly, offering a gesture of forgiveness. "Thank you, Sarah," she said gently. The lesson was clear. Hate and prejudice, though they may appear strong and unyielding, ultimately crumble under the weight of truth, courage, and simple human decency. Outside, Mr. Sterling faced the consequences of his actions. The details would later emerge. He was suspended from his position, pending an investigation by the store's corporate owners. His reputation was tarnished, perhaps irreparably, and the false sense of power he had so carefully cultivated had been stripped away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. But more importantly, the world saw what happens when justice stands firm, when individuals refuse to be silenced in the face of bigotry. Inside the jewelry shop, as Eleanor held the delicate locket in her hands, examining its intricate details, the air felt lighter, cleaner, filled with something much stronger than hate, hope. Eleanor left the shop that day, knowing that the world still had a long way to go, that the fight for equality and understanding was far from over. But she also knew that every small victory mattered, that every act of courage, no matter how seemingly insignificant, made a difference. As she drove home, she thought about the countless others who had faced similar acts of prejudice, those without a badge, without a title, without the power to fight back. She thought of the single mother turned away from an opportunity because of her race, the young student who was underestimated because of where they came from, and the countless voices silenced by fear. Her heart burned with determination. She promised herself that she would continue to fight, not just in courtrooms, but in everyday life, challenging prejudice wherever she encountered it. Because justice wasn't just about laws and legal proceedings, it was about changing hearts and minds, about fostering empathy and understanding. She would speak out louder, fight harder, and lift up those who needed a voice. As the city lights blurred past her window, she knew that this moment, this seemingly small incident in a jewelry shop, was just one of many battles. But with every person who chooses courage over fear, truth over ignorance, and kindness over hate, the world edged a little closer to justice. And that was a future worth fighting for. She promised herself she would keep fighting, not just in the courtroom but in everyday life, because justice isn't just about laws, it's about people, and every person deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter who they are. As the sun set behind her, casting long shadows across the road, Eleanor's heart felt full. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was always worth it. And in that moment, she knew that standing up for what is right would always be the path she chose. She looked at the necklace in her hands, knowing it was more than just a gift for her mother. It was a reminder of resilience, of the strength it takes to push back against ignorance. And as she placed it gently in the passenger seat beside her, she whispered to herself, "One battle at a time, we change the world. No one is above kindness, and no one is beneath respect. We must never judge people based on our own fears or prejudices. The world needs more love, more fairness, and more people willing to stand up for what is right. True power lies not in controlling others but in treating them with dignity. In the end, justice always finds its way, and the truth always shines through the darkness." Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.